Yo, 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 what's good? It's Bear in the building. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Kueen Talk. If you are new here, welcome. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe button, leave a comment. Let us know what you think of this episode. We have a very special guest who is based out of New York City, y'all. Jordan Anderson. Please help me welcome Jordan Anderson. How you doing, Jordan?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. You want to let the audience know your pronouns and how you identify in the community?
Yes, so my name is Jordan Anderson Story. Pronouns he, him, his, they, them, theirs. And I identify as queer.
All right, queer. I love I was talking on my guests previously, like queer, the umbrella, it just
hmm
lets you flow into what all the dynamics, so you don't put
Correct.
yourself in like this one little box. Were you born and raised in New York City?
That's a great question. So I will say I'm a military brat. I was born actually in Europe. I spent a good portion of my life in Europe, but also I see that you grew up in a small town. My family is from a small town in Missouri.
Okay, that's right down the
So
street. That's right down the
yeah.
street, Jordan. I'm in Kansas, so that's like literally
Oh,
next
for real,
door.
for real. Yeah,
Yeah.
so my family is from a small town, but I also have moved around a lot. So Missouri, Ohio, Texas, outside the DC area, and I currently reside in New York. So all over the place.
And what landed you in New York? Why?
Great question. I think we can definitely build off this in further conversation, but essentially I ran out of Middle America as someone who is Black and queer. Um, I basically realized that there was opportunities for me in New York, but also in the state that I was working with before, I could see that there was a far right rise. So I was like, oh, I need to go. So I ran to New York.
Okay, yeah. New York is a place to be that if you're looking for some culturally diverse people, that's for sure. But you said you ran to New York. What experience is that like for you growing up like as like a military kid that's literally raised in so many different places, moving around? Like how have you found like your group? Like
You know, it's been fascinating because it's ongoing, but at the exact same point, I have always been in the right place at the right time. You know what I mean? So I have found my tribe in the weirdest of places, but I've also been Black in numerous places. So I have seen the dynamic of what Blackness is in parts of Europe, in parts of the United States, in the Americas.
yeah.
Um, so I have found, I would say, decolonial Black, brown people all over the place, and that became more of my tribe. I've even found um, some neurodivergent, I would say, white people that understand and empathize without actually being full blown. What's the word for it? When basically, like, you understand people of color, you advocates and allies, where they sit back, they listen, they try to understand, versus constantly putting their thought process and whiteness front and center. If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that is such a unique experience too, just because like you said, I don't know if you've been to Missouri a lot.
Eight
But
years.
yeah, 8 years. So like I would say it's similar to Kansas, like Wichita, like where I'm from, where it comes to
Yeah.
um like black people specifically, and like I've only seen like one way. Like you've got to experience like Wichita. I would say you said the state that you ran from has become more of a red state. I would say I'm seeing that more in Wichita than I have
hmm
before ever. And I think it's as an adult I just see more things. Like I catch on things more, just like not seeing representation. People not caring that there's no representation. They're content with like what they see and stuff like that. So I
hmm
think that's a unique experience. And moving state to state, like you have, how have you like found your roots within each spot? Like, are in your how has that transition to like your relationships that you find now? I know like if you are constantly moving, making friendships and relationships, and then having to move and do that, how has that been for you? Or how was that for you?
At first, I'll be for real, it was traumatizing. So my parents um, were born in the 1950s. They were raised in Missouri. They both went to college, and they pushed Black excellence from the moment I was young. I was born in the 1990s. I was raised in the 90s and the 2000s. So Black excellence was front and center. They were first generation of the college. Um, and basically, I was trying to root for that level of perfectionism with Black excellence and making sure that I did everything correctly to go to college, knowing that I was in very white spaces in parts of the Midwest and realizing, okay, being hyper vigilant where I knew I had eyes on me, not just my folks, but also white people around me, the law, etc., systems. Um, but then also finding friends along the way that were aware of that too, maybe not to the same degree, but we're aware of it, and I can give an example in a second. Um, but, but until I was about 18, it was traumatizing because I was chameleoning a little bit because I graduated high school in rural Missouri, and then I went to Ohio for college. And when I say rural, I mean rural. Like it was, we did have kids who would drive tractors to school.
Oh
So
wow.
we're talking, yeah, Confederate flags. Yeah, because people think Missouri. I've had to explain this to people on the East Coast. People think that Missouri, Kansas, so like, oh, it's the Midwest. I'm like, it depends on what part of the state that you're in. Missouri is half Iowa, half Arkansas. The part of Missouri
Mm,
that I'm from was Confederacy.
mm,
You're from a
jeez.
part of Kansas where you have military folks, you have Latinos, you have a mix of different people, but there is still a feeling of Middle America, but also Southernness to it too.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so moving within that dynamic and finding queer people, especially in the 90s and 2000s, was basically not going to happen. It was very difficult. I was still not out. I grew up in a Christian home. I'm not sure if you did too.
Hmm. Definitely did. Yeah.
Yeah. So even my parents, I couldn't be out. But oddly enough, I guess with queerdar, gaydar, what have you, I still met other queer people, but the relationships were never really that long because I was just moving to the next place pretty
Right.
quickly.
Yeah. So you're like you're moving to the next place quickly, so you didn't like build those relationships throughout. So now,
Yeah.
how I didn't catch how long have you been in New York now?
I've been in New York now for 2 years.
2 years. Okay, so you just got there. You just
Hmm.
pretty much fresh. Do you feel like you'll stay in New York, or do you feel like naturally now you're just like a person that's on the go? Like you like to, you'll feel like you'll adapt to that lifestyle, like being places for a few years and then dipping out.
Great question. So I consider myself stable. Life has never let me be stable. Every single time I try to develop roots somewhere, something comes in, just knocks it. So the last place I was in, I had a good job for a very large school uh, in Ohio, and I planned on settling down there. I planned on like looking for like a life partner, and then before that, I had spent 6 years in the DC area in the DMV. So moving from the DMV to Ohio was kind of a wake up call, even though I had gone to school in Ohio before. But then job security just was not good in Ohio. And then also, I could not really find another job. So I was like, you need to go someplace where you're going to have more job security, where there's going to be more Black and brown queer people. Also, I over time with my neurodivergence realized I love cars. I don't like being in a car every day. That took some maturity to figure out. So I was like, okay, you need to go somewhere where there is public transit available. That basically leaves you with New York or Chicago. It's like them Chicago winters are no joke. So
Definitely.
I
The
have fam.
Kansas ones are no joke, so I know the Chicago ones.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, so let's try to get to New York. I had friends there already. I set up shop. I actually worked part time, was on Medicare or Medicaid for a little while I was trying to get myself set up, but it was a huge risk. I did it, a very stressful risk. Um, but there's a level of security here that I do feel being a black person, a queer person, that I have not felt in other places.
Yeah, I think you brought up a point of just being around black and brown queer people.
Hmm.
And that's something that Wichita, I'm like creating this space. I have to be very intentional on looking
Hmm.
on searching for the for us in within this community. Which starting this, like I have, like we're out here. It's just like we stay to ourselves here in Wichita for some reason. Um, so I'm trying to pull that out, but because like I've always wanted to be like, okay, I just like want to leave and go somewhere that it's already there, like um Atlanta. I've always
Yeah.
said Atlanta is somewhere that like I wanted to end up, but it was just like it's I'm gonna have to find that connection even if I move to Atlanta. So it's like staying here. I've convinced myself if I stay here in Wichita a few more years and build that connection here and just because we're out here, you just have to search for it.
Yeah.
So you do want to connect and find those people. So I can see why New York would be the place to be.
Well, black people are everywhere. Queer people are
Mm,
everywhere. We're in
mm,
places that you would never expect to find us.
mm,
Wichita does have a substantial, not large, but a substantial black population because of the base. It's also been there historically,
mhm,
um, it- for a very long time. Kansas in general, and I'm telling people since my parents are Midwesterners, my grandparents are Southerners and from the Caribbean. Uh, but when I tell people, my folks are Midwesterners, I'm somewhat of a Midwesterner. They're like, how is it being black in the Midwest? I'm like, well, it depends on where you are. But blackness is rooted in Midwest DNA, but it's been erased. It's not very out there, but it's there.
mhm,
People usually think about Chicago or St. Louis, but they don't think about the Twin Cities. They don't think about Kansas City,
mhm,
where jazz had a huge impact, barbecue had a huge impact.
mhm,
They don't even think about the black farmers in far west Kansas, where you had slaves that ran from Missouri and Arkansas into Kansas because it was a free state. We've been there for hundreds of years.
yeah. I seen it's it was a free state, but it was very
Yeah,
much not so free. Like it definitely was still um, had its down for sure, but it was quote unquote a free state.
yeah.
Um, and I'm just now like I'm not originally from Wichita. I was raised in El Dorado, which is a small town just 30 minutes east of Wichita,
Hmm.
but that 30 minutes east is a different than what it is here. And so like I wasn't raised around a lot of black people,
Yeah,
just my family. And so when you said like it wasn't, we weren't driving tractors to school, but we were like one step away from that, my hometown. So getting to Wichita, I've been here for like 8 years now. It
hmm,
is just like a different experience. Like I'm just now tapping into that culture that was I didn't see growing up. Like representation, black representation was like I said, just my family,
yeah.
and just what you see on TV or like basketball games that I went to, just like wasn't an everyday thing for me. And so now, as an adult, like I'm searching for that. Like putting myself intentionally in places and building that culture up for myself just that I missed out on in my life of the last 25 the first 25 years of my life. So it's been an experience for sure.
I completely understand that because despite the fact I'm a military kid, my father is from a small town, Missouri. So every single time we moved back to Missouri, we were going back to a small town. And my experience is a little bit like yours in the instance that this small town had a very, very small black population. Now, my grandparents settled there in the 1960s from Georgia because the town had just desegregated, um, and their schools had opened up. They had far better schools than the schools that were closer to the Air Force Base. So, in some ways, my parents hear this. Well, um, they were like my family were tokenized. Like my grandfather was a pastor at a mostly white church, um, handful of people of color, but they knew him by name. The town knew him by name. We were the black family that essentially were tokenized in that town.
Hmm.
Um, and like you, I grew up around black people, but not like a mass of black people. Like my mom grew up in the inner city. She grew up around a lot of black people. But during the 1990s, 2000s, black excellence, of course, she was working her way up the ladder, as was my dad. So a lot of the people we were around were mostly white. Um, so I learned how to code switch. I learned how to essentially speak one way to my parents, but speak outside the house completely different. Um, and even now, for real, like when I think about Midwestern niceness, you might empathize with this, I'm not sure. It's really interesting to see how nice Midwesterners are, and I'm quoting that for anyone who can't see me. And then you actually see who they really are behind that niceness, and you realize, oh, wait a second, you're not nice at all.
Hmm.
Um,
Very much fake.
it's very fake, especially when it comes to difference. Midwesterners, I have noticed from my personal experience, I'm not talking about all, I'm mostly talking about a certain type of Midwesterner are very friendly to your face, but behind your back, especially if you do not fit the racial, sexual, or class dynamic of the Midwest, can be very, very brutal.
Hmm.
And when I was living there, every 4 years, every election, you saw it right in front of your face.
Yeah, yeah, and I was just telling someone this in the past. Like I used to have a Facebook, but I deleted that Facebook because just like my old friends were on there, and you mentioned like being tokenized earlier too, and just like I relate to that so much. I didn't even know what that was until I got much older, but just like looking back on it, I was just like, yeah, it's I was the only black woman who graduated from my graduating
Mhm.
class. Like I was so um, and to this day, like a lot of them don't put themselves in black spaces. Like we're the only black family that they know or hang out or whoever it may be. Um, they don't intentionally do that. So um, it is just like different. It's so different. And like you said, just like with the election and finding out people's true colors, you definitely you see it as like I said again, like when as you're an adult, as a kid, you're growing up, you don't see it. Like
Yeah, I'll see
you're
it.
you're you're kind of blind to it. So I mean, of course, there's sometimes you just think you're getting picked on in certain situations. Like you don't think like the the real heaviness of like what they're saying and like the insults that they're saying to you till you get older, and it's just completely different mindset. You growing up, I just wanted to talk about just like you said that you weren't comfortable coming out as gay, but also just like and you said it was a religious household, but it's also a military household. So like
Yes.
how did that play a factor in like your upbringing?
So I come from two generations of military backgrounds. Most of my family is either Army, Air Force, uh, or works in some type of faction with the Department of Defense. Is so one thing I have been doing lately is doing with actually unpacking a lot of generational trauma. If you are a black person or a brown person, I definitely recommend talking to your elders, talk to your parents, ask them what was it like growing up in their house. Ask it to your parents, ask it to your grandparents, and then you will see how stuff has trickled down the line to you. And this is kind of how I started my journey regarding healing. But to your initial question, my family went into the military in the 1950s. My grandfather was mixed race enough to the point where he was still a person of color. He was still very much black, but was still just light complected enough to not make them feel too uncomfortable. This was his way to get out of the rural South. And he got out of the rural South, segregated South, was married to my grandmother, and they were able to travel the world, etc. What things that they could not do if they did not have that access. But that generational trauma of the segregation of the rural South never really left my family. Because in a way, it came out essentially as classism to other Black Americans who were working class poor, and then also to poor rural whites, despite the fact that they were being tokenized, which I'm like, what? But for me personally, it was rough in the instance you had hypermasculinity in the household. I still had a Southern grandfather or Southern grandparents, Midwestern parents. I was like, you basically were taught that I need to go into Boy Scouts, I need to do martial arts, etc. These are things that my parents couldn't do. These are things that my grandparents couldn't do, but I could. Um, so I still had to put up that hyper masculine front. I was still like, for example, like when it came to going to prom, etc. They're like, "Who are you thinking about taking?" I was like, "Nobody. I'm not doing this. This is stupid." I was like, "I'm not going to this white prom trying to like, bring somebody." Nah. Um, but it was toxic in the instance that there was so much trauma that my parents could not undo. I wouldn't have expected them to because they grew up in the 60s and the 70s. They finally got a seat at the table, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Though it was
Yeah.
a plastic seat, they got a seat at the table. And then once I went to college, because I went to a PWI in Ohio, and I realized I could stay at that table, but in order to do that, I would need to allow oppression. I would need to allow racist comments to be said in front of my face and not do anything about it. I would need to allow classism, genocide, a number of other different things that, as a Black person who is a descendant of slaves, I was not going to allow.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me going to school, going into my 20s, going into my 30s, dating people outside of my ethnic background to have to learn the hard lessons, to learn a lot of things regarding my childhood that was not okay, but my parents and my grandparents did because that was their survival. That was also generational that I had to unravel myself and essentially start my own path as a queer person, as a Black person, and as a person who was a descendant of people who survived much worse situations than I do, gathered trauma and survived those situations. But it was my duty to try and undo as much of that as I could while still maintaining my humanity.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's so awesome that you have like asked your parents those questions and sat down and had those conversations, because I just feel like you even like knowing like your history and like where your generation like comes from, like the ancestors and stuff like that. Like I seen like you were like you wrote down like Black Midwesterners and like grandchild of Southerners, like like the history of where you come from. And I keep saying like I need to like every time I ask my grandma like anything, she's just like seems like she doesn't know. Like she just it's I don't know, she's like blocked it out or what. I'm gonna have to really just like sit down with because she's the last one of her siblings. So it's like I need to figure out that history like as much as I can and have it documented too. Like I need to do that and get that family. I think that's awesome that you did that with your family to get
Yeah.
that understanding.
Well, my family always talked about history. Like, for example, you being in Kansas, my mom's family, a lot of them worked they worked for GM. So they worked in car factories. What brought them to the Midwest was getting out of the South. That was what actually happened to a lot of Black Midwesterners. They were like, yeah, Chicago, Kansas City, St. Louis, Twin Cities, Wichita, they still have segregation, but it's not this. We can still move up somewhat, get that seat to the table a little bit closer than we would down here. But then you ask them essentially, what was down there? And then they start telling you their stories of essentially, oh, it was terrible. We were in rural Alabama. There wasn't a lot of opportunities. Essentially, we were in a county that was 80% Black, 20% white, but the 20% owned everything. So what were we going to do? It's like, okay, so the reason you went to the military, the reason you ran north was because you wanted opportunities, but because of systematic racism. Yes.
Mm.
It's like, and here we are 2, 3 generations later, still getting over it.
Hmm. And content like and where we are right now, it's like it feels like we're going backwards in some ways. It's but at the same time still pressing forward. Like of course it's completely different than what it was, right? But I just feel like the laws and stuff, like with the whole DEI and stuff, they're just trying to discredit um, all the progress that's been made, which is it's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. I'm trying to think of a way to describe how I truly feel on it. It's cataclysmic what they're doing, but when you actually look at the logic of what they're doing, you're seeing essentially that they are doing just about anything to maintain control. All right, yeah, so I will keep it less than 2 minutes. First off, the Civil War never ended.
Mm.
I love when people are like, well, the Civil War ended. It really never did. This is a somewhat controversial opinion, but the Civil War never really ended, and the United States was really never fully united. It was allied. We are different regions of the country. So where you are in Wichita, have you been to Kansas City?
Hmm.
It feels very different, doesn't it, when you
Yeah.
travel? Yeah. So you can go 2 hours, and the dynamic of the country is going to change completely. Um, However, with that change, and with the information that we have in the digital age, we have cell phones, we have computers. You can get information that you need right in front of you. How old are you?
I'm 33. Dang,
33.
I had to think about that. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
He has like, wait a second. Oh, let's
So
start
I'm also
33.
33. But being born in the 1990s, we didn't have the access that we do now to information. We had the news, we had the newspaper, we
Hmm.
got the radio. So it was limited. Like, for example, I remember when the Oklahoma City bombing happened back in 1995. I was 4. I didn't find out about it until
That's crazy because I don't remember that at all. At all. But
my brain.
yeah.
But yeah, I remember hearing about it. But by the time my family did hear it was like 2, 3 weeks later. Now you're hearing about it within minutes,
Hmm.
seconds of something happening. So you have to figure out where you sit with all this information that's coming at you. And since we have all this information, you have people that you're seeing the real them once they find out someone is oppressed, once they find out somebody is a victim of systematic violence, once they found out that essentially someone steals uh, a number of things that can be seen as right and wrong. You're seeing where their morality is at. And over the last 20 years, we have seen where parts of this country, parts of this world, and parts of our leaders' morality is because you're forced to choose in the moment. How deep is someone going to go down the loophole to figure out the truth? Is someone going to actually bypass the truth and elect a certain individual knowing fully what he has said?
Hmm.
And that's what's driving that divide.
Yep. Yeah. And creating chaos. Creating chaos
Mm-hmm.
is what they're definitely doing. And I was just like talking to other people on the podcast too, just like we're all that. And I thought about it now is because like during the talk we were like we're all getting the same information of what's going on, but we're all getting the same information, but at the same time we're not, because I watch all news outlets, and if you're only watching
Mm-hmm.
Fox News,
Yeah.
I get why they got you trapped.
Oh yeah.
I get it why you think this certain way, and also on the complete opposite side of thing, if you're only watching MSNBC, you're going to just feel this one certain way. So I'm a person like I watch Fox News because I gotta hear what they're telling y'all people, and
Yeah.
so I can really try to understand it and like give feedback. Like I need time to like to process things. That's how my
Mm-hmm.
brain works, to be able to come back with like I'm not quick with it like that. I'm not a quick person. It takes me time to process. They're creating this divide of how they're just like I said, creating chaos,
Hmm.
giving this one way narrative of things, and you are seeing people's true colors come out for sure.
Yeah,
And I am just like seeing certain old people, I don't even want to call them friends anymore, that I used to associate with, seeing them like, dang, like then when you like the tokenized thing of like going back, it's just like you really see that when when like you said, when certain topics come up, you see it plain as day, and it's hurtful. Like it's like, dang,
it is.
you only like me for this one certain way. As you said, just like previously, you have to fit this certain black specific person for them to even want to hear your story or understand you.
It is hurtful, but at the exact same point, there's positives and negatives with what's going on. What you listed are all, well, actually, I would say they're all negatives. There are some positives in the instance you're seeing people's true colors. Like, for example, you're realizing, oh, these people were never truly your friends. They were using you for their own ego. They were not actually your friend. And in addition, for example, there's a certain country or territory, depending upon the person, that is currently going through mass loss of life because of imperialism and a number of different things. Once you see the death toll, you have to decide what you're going to do with that information. Is that something that you're going to ignore? Is that something that you're going to be like, no, that should not happen? Um, And over the last 10 years in specific, you have had to see a lot of information coming at you, as stated, from different places. And even if it's coming from a place like Fox News, it only takes a millisecond to get on your phone and see if that's true, see if what else people are saying. Now, you also, did you graduate from El Dorado High School?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, like I said, I graduated from a rural Missouri high school, and one of my biggest wake up calls in this life was going from my rural education to a liberal arts education at a PWI with a bunch of East Coast kids, and seeing that the education that I was given in rural America and the education I was given in suburban and urban America and a private institution were so vastly different. I did not learn how to critically think, like critical thinking skills, until I got to college. And there is a reason why most Americans are not taught critical thinking skills. You can't be employed by an abusive, systematically abusive organization if you know critical thinking skills. So you can't be manipulated by a book that is pertained as holy if you know critical thinking skills and if you start dissecting texts. And if you don't know critical thinking skills, that will make you a great employee. That will make you a great Fox News watcher. That will make you a great person to fit into systems blindly to oppress other people just so you keep from being oppressed without even realizing you are oppressed.
Mm-hmm. Yep, just stuck in the rat race. Nine to
Yep.
five, getting by, giving the dollar back, like literally just a cycle. Yeah, it's wild. I think it's unique. Like our story is so unique. I feel like if you're a black person who grew up in a white school, like it is just different.
Trauma.
It is just different. And you like, oh my gosh, I'm just like the experience that I have. I won't like I don't regret like my parents, my family, they did the best that they could, like with what they have. And
Mm-hmm.
I always like I'm just like, why didn't you guys get me out of that? Like why did we like why couldn't we come to like move to Wichita to like get me involved like in the culture a little bit more or whatnot? But I'm just like, they like going back to like if I were to ask them like the questions that you asked them, like wow, that you asked your family of just like the history and stuff, I could would probably find those answers. But they were just like so content with the life there. Like
Yeah.
my grandma still there. That's her home. Like of course her property. Like I get it. Um, but I'm just like, man, why stay there? Why stay there?
Yeah, so my family still lives down south. They left Missouri, they moved to another to a southern state, and I think I told you already it's Texas. But I was actually having a relatively healing conversation with my mom because I was like, why of all places did we move to the places that we did, like being in white spaces the way we did? And she discussed the trauma that she experienced in uh, growing up in an urban area back in the 1960s and 1970s, where you had a lot of crime. She saw essentially white flight out of the urban areas. She also saw the rise of crime. She saw the riots that happened because of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. And she was like, yes, we were in a white environment, but it was safe for you. Okay,
Hmm.
it was still safe. I didn't have to worry about you being outside and getting hurt or killed because of something. Like so it happened to so many of my other friends when I was in school. So I was like, oh, I see. So basically, despite being in a very white and somewhat racist environment, you knew when we walked outside, we probably were not going to get hurt. She's like, I knew you were not going to get hurt as a black man or a black child who was a boy. But I was like, but I was still queer. So was I really that safe? And then with her being black, straight woman born in the 1950s, that did not register because she still has a level of heteronormativity to the point where she will not understand the systematic violence that black queer people still face daily. And even when I was trying to explain it to her, it went completely over her head, which I see also as being very innocent. I mean, she doesn't understand the systematic things I had to face being in a military, racist, imperialistic environment as a black person. Her primary thought process was, I want my family in a safe environment where I know they cannot be harmed. If racism happens, if imperialism happens, so be it. And that's a lot of people. Your grandmother, I can't put words in her mouth, but she's like, I feel safe here. I feel
Hmm.
recognized here. Where you, as a black queer person, is like, this is not healthy for me. But for her, if she is heterosexual, her heteronormativity, her age, she probably feels just fine.
Yeah, and she has like a community there, but yeah, I think my grandma, I took her to the Essence Fest, and
Wow.
yeah, that was the first time my grandma has been around like that black excellence like that before. One of the first comments she made, like at the end of the thing, she was like, "Man, I'm surprised nothing like bad happened during that time." And it's just like
Yeah.
it's we can come together and
Yeah.
have a good time and be not something bad happened, but it's just that's where like her mind um when she grew up in. And so like that's like how I was raised in a sense. Just like so it was good for her to see, and like I was glad to give her that experience because I gifted it to her and my mom for Christmas, and that was just it was
That's amazing.
so it was, yeah, we had a great time, like just being around the culture and just like that the vibe, the energy there, it was amazing. So
That's awesome. So that was your mom's first time too, experiencing like being in a very well, first off, a mass black environment that was also pro black.
yeah, yeah, and didn't even like really dive into like my mom's experience. It was just like more of my grandma. When my grandma said that, I was just like we had a conversation. It was just like about like that's it doesn't have to be like that. Like there's definitely black excellence everywhere. But I just think like my grandma just being raised in El Dorado, she just what she's seen on TV, like it's not that. So just like brainwashed and all of that. So it was it was different though. It was a good experience for her to have. That's for sure.
So you said that most of your family still lives out in rural Kansas. Does almost all your family live in Kansas, or do you still have family like down south, etc.?
my family's like pretty small, so it's like
Okay.
my grandma, my grandpa, they came from Arkansas,
Mm-hmm.
so there's I think like there's a few cousins still in Arkansas, but a lot of the family, like my grandpa's siblings, they all moved to El Dorado, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like the railroad is why the jobs, like a lot of them
Mm-hmm.
came to from Arkansas to El Dorado, and then they stayed. I think my grandparents got the house now that they live in. My mom was like 12 and been there ever since. And it actually my grandpa passed away last year,
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
and
that.
my grandma's the house burned down like February 7th of this year. And so I'm like, okay. So I'm like, okay, maybe like grandma, like let's get out of El Dorado, like let's.
Yeah.
But she's still trying to find a place in El Dorado, and I'm just trying to like get her to like try something different, like.
Mm-hmm.
But I think she's gonna still like she's just gonna find something in El Dorado. But so I'm trying to like push her to just get out that comfort zone and leave that town. But yeah, that's how long that they've been there though, and that's all. They're all still there.
How old is your grandmother?
74. He's 74.
Gotcha. So, yeah, with a lot of older uh Black Americans, I have noticed that they will take comfort over essentially, not all, of course, but a lot of older Black Americans, they will take comfort over essentially trying to navigate out of their situation. Because if that's all they know, that's all they know. Like, I still have
Mm-hmm.
family. Um, Actually, so my paternal grandmother, she stayed with my uncle and aunts. My almost most of my family lives outside of DC, and she stayed with them, had great accommodations, and then she still took the money that she had and moved back to Missouri because that's what she knew, and
Yeah.
she is
Mm.
still there. Um, she's like, "Hey, you should come visit." I'm like, "No." Um,
I think naturally, just like home, people are just like content with home. Like even me
mhm,
saying like earlier, like I leaving Kansas to go to Atlanta. Now that I'm older, I don't think Atlanta would be the place, but I still want to find like a spot that's full of queer people of color that like I just feel more comfortable around. Just because like when I go out to spaces now, I go to a restaurant now, I'm still probably one of two tables that are people of color. Like it's still
mhm,
white, very much white spaces wherever I go, unless I'm intentional, like about the events that I go to. But just like a regular restaurant, no. Like so,
mhm.
still getting out of my comfort zone of leaving this space because I still think Wichita is predominantly white too. Like it, like you said,
Yeah,
there's a lot of black people, but there it's very much segregated here in this town. Like it
yeah.
is very much so. So just getting out of that comfort zone and just leaving the state, finding that connection, that representation. Um, and you did that. You did that, Jordan. You found that representation, and
I did. I was fortunate. I think the internet has also brought a lot of people together. For example, I'm in New York. I'm talking to you in Kansas.
yeah.
So, with the future of essentially POC spaces, Black liberation, I think the internet's going to be a catalyst in that. Where you're going to have Black spaces like podcasts, etc., um, TikTok, and stuff is still being created that are going to be made for Black, for Brown, for decolonial spaces, for people to come together in all parts of the world, for you to be essentially connected with other Black, with other Brown people. One thing I do appreciate about being a Black person, descendant of enslaved people as well, is that you see Blackness across the Americas in all different forms. Um, you being in Kansas, I met someone who's Black and grew up in Montana. And I was like, that must have been interesting. And then he was like, it was, but there are Black people in Montana. They've been there since the 19th century. I started doing some research on it and I was like, wasn't it racist? He's like, yes, but it was more so racist toward the Native Americans who were there versus the Black Americans. I spent some time on a reservation, and I really wish we could have more conversations with the Native American population, not the ones who are whitewashed, but the actual Native American population who do want to do stuff with the Black community, because the way they are treated, my God, especially in the Dakotas, in the Rocky Mountains, it's awful.
Hmm.
But to go back to your point, I think the internet will provide a lot of support for people who want to find Black communities, because you don't necessarily even need to live in Atlanta anymore. You can
Hmm.
connect with Atlanta online through
It's
TikTok, through your podcast.
hmm and that's what I've told myself. That's why I'm still here. That's why I was like, I'm gonna try to just connect with the people that are here, and like you said, online through socials and stuff. So I'm doing that for sure. And you are very much out as queer now. Has
Unapologetically.
unapologetically. When did that start for you? Like when was that for you?
First off, like you said, PG-13. Um, I had two choices growing up in a Christian home. I realized, okay, look, you got two choices. Either you lie on lie about who you are, you mess up your life, you mess up other people's lives because you're on the DL, which you have seen happen all the time, or you be out about it, it be uncomfortable, you be proud of who you are, and you meet the right people, you can be scared and do it anyway. And I decided the second option. It was either choose lying all the time and not having the life I wanted even then, or choose the life I wanted, living in, I quote this, sin, but still have the life I wanted. And I was like, yeah, I think I need to go ahead and do the life I want, because first off, I'm not going to burn myself and I'm not going to burn a lot of other people in the process. So let's go with the second option.
How old were you?
So I first started coming out to people when I was maybe 16, to a few very close individuals. That did not go out well because people in small towns can't keep their mouth shut. So so it came out a little bit, and then I kind of like controlled it a little bit. I was like, nah, chill. I was like, well, that didn't work. I know I can't come out here. Then once I got to college, I came out my freshman year. I was one of the few Black people on my PWI campus that was out about their sexuality. I came out to my parents when I was 22, though my mom probably knew for some time. I thought my dad would have the easier time with it, and actually, they uh, so they both took it in their own way. Um, my dad didn't talk to me for a couple of days, which was fine. I'm like, take as much time as you need, but I'm doing this whether you like it or not. Also, I am an only child, so I'm like, listen, I love
Mm.
you both, but I am basically the one who's about to take care of you when you get older, so tread carefully. Because don't get me wrong, I love you, but if you don't want to talk to your only son, I get it, but I'm not going to be miserable because of you. So do what you need to do. They came around. They did come around. But the 20s were a little rough. You live in the Midwest, so a lot of times I did date people from who were white. I dated people who were Black. I had to learn the hard way regarding stuff like fetishization.
Mm. Mm.
Um, I had to learn that the hard way. So, with that said, I became unapologetically queer once I started learning that queerness is ancient, is holy, and it goes far back in humanity. It goes far back
Mhm.
in Black and brown people to before colonization. Uh, we are still human. And in fact, in various parts of sub-Saharan Africa, it was honored. It was
Mm.
completely fine until colonization. um, Being queer is very American, and not just for the United States, but for the Americas. Even the native people who were here had queerness. Queerness is ingrained into this country's DNA. It always has been. And not just white queerness, POC
Mhm.
queerness. Um, it's part of Midwest heritage. you know dang well there are two women living together in their 90s somewhere in rural Kansas that have been together for years, and people know exactly who they are, but it's just not talked about.
Hmm.
So once I put that up,
I was just I do, but it would sidetrack my one of my grandma's friends. They live together. They don't sleep together. They've been together for a while. They've never even been to a pride or anything like that. Um, they're like very old school gays, like still scared. I feel like to celebrate themselves type. So,
there's a lot of people like that.
mm-hmm,
It's wild. I actually was hearing about someone who lived. I was in Canada, and someone was telling me about a native couple who lived in the middle of nowhere, upper Quebec, that were obviously queer, but they lived in different rooms. They had been together for 60 plus years, and I'm like, yeah, we're all over the place. Um, People have an idea of what queerness looks like, but I speak specifically in the Black American community, which is still rooted very much in the church. Um, there is still issues that need to be essentially addressed regarding how the church, blackness, colonization, imperialism all intertwine together, and that how that still affects queerness.
mm-hmm.
As twisted as it is, we would not have the choir music we do, nor the gospel we do, which then would give birth to so many different genres of music without queer choir directors. That was us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of churches that just goes without like being unspoken about or whatnot. What's your faith like now? Coming out and live loudly as queer.
Great question. So I have, I don't think I gave you my full background. First off, very spiritual. I do tarot card readings. I talk to my ancestors. I am my ancestors. I'm descended from them. They are in me. My spirituality is still very much tied to a lot of West African spirituality. On my dad's side, it was, like I said, mostly rooted in the church, Episcopalian, Methodist. So I took some stuff that I remember from growing up in church, though I'm no longer linked with the church. But on my mom's side, it's Catholic and Jewish.
Hmm.
So I have taken things from those faiths, predominantly Judaism, and incorporated into my spirituality. Um, we found out that Jewishness had been in my family for a long time. It just wasn't really talked about. So I've incorporated a lot of those back into my faith as someone who also technically would be considered Jewish.
Awesome. I asked that question just because, when it comes to queer and like faith, sometimes it can just like be a sore subject just because people have been um, steered away from the church of just like
Mm.
the hatefulness that may come with it. And recently, like I've tapped back into my faith and have my own relationship with God, and
Yeah.
so did
I
it for
said I was
me.
spiritual, not religious.
Yeah, yeah. You did say that. You did say that. What how is your family like now? You said that they've grown. Um, you bringing partners back to your family, like is that something that you would do, that you do?
I would bring a partner to my family. Now, karma being karma. First off, I was well aware I'm not the only queer person in our family. And now there are three or four queer people in my family, my cousins. Um, I think there has been other queer people in my family, they just haven't been out about it. But I'm like, okay, I have three or four other cousins who are out about their sexuality. One is trans, two are gay. Um, and then there's me. So I'm like, okay, so this runs in our family. Queerness runs in our family. I
And
wonder where it came from.
yeah, in everybody's family, runs in everybody's family for sure.
Correct. So with that said, yeah, I would bring partners back to my house. My parents, they are still relatively socially conservative. So I think they would treat them well, knowing fully that I had feelings for them. I wouldn't be scared to bring someone home, though. Um, I'm more concerned about my grandparents. they've probably been like, so what's going on? Because my grandmother still used the word Oriental, and I'm like, oh, dude, stop saying that. I'm like, Nana, I'm like, you can't be calling people who are Asian Orientals now. Come
Oh my
on.
gosh.
But she was born in the late 30s, early 40s, so
Mhm.
it is what it is. How about you?
Yeah, those grandparents, they be my grandma. My grandma, I've been on her this episode, but she just be they just be saying things sometimes. I'm just
No
like,
filter. No filter.
yeah, like chill out, chill out.
Oh,
My family is open to my relationship. They know I've been bringing around partners for since like I came out. Like once
mhm.
I said I'm gay, that's when I was like, yeah, here it is. There it went. And my family just started, like you said, you had a few cousins. My family started coming out. Like as soon as I'm I said I'm bisexual first. I'm bisexual. Other family members were like, they came out too, so it was like okay. And then we do have a lot of queer people in my family, so bringing people home is hasn't ever been a problem, or around my other family members either. So
I'm very much into men, and then there's Gabrielle Union.
and there's Gabrielle Union.
And I'm just like, oh, for her, and as twisted as it sounds, Angela Bassett, I'm just saying, if Angela Bassett told me to do something, I would probably do it.
That's funny. That's funny. What's something in your story that they're like, oh man, I want people to know this about you?
A lot of things. So first off, when you were talking about spirituality, I also am really into like astrology, numerology. I do readings along with tarot. I have my undergrad in international studies with a minor in sociology and urban studies. But my master's is in conflict analysis and resolution, more specifically polarization between urban and rural America. So I did pieces of my thesis on that regarding the divide between urban and rural America. And as someone who grew up large portions of my life in rural America, also incorporating the Christian right and why it was growing, along with why that's being fed so much through polarization and politics. Um,
Understands like your education, like this it's all making sense now, like your education
yeah.
is, yeah.
And then also, I'm right now assisting on writing a book. Um, I am not the primary author, but I've been deeply involved in a storytelling project called Kingdom of Shadows. I've collaborated closely with the writer, contributing to the development of themes, character arcs, broader narrative vision, and it's basically set in a fictional Caribbean nation where the legacy of like colonialism and authoritarianism intertwine. And it's about confronting historical trauma while fighting for liberation. It's very queer. It's very black and brown. We're aiming to publish it probably around 2026, 2027.
Awesome. I feel like you got your hands in like a little bit of everything, huh? What's something that you have exciting
Um,
happening?
Exciting happening? Hmm. Other than kind of like sitting and watching things fall apart and you're like, well, this is interesting. Um, but right now I'm probably going to be starting at martial arts again. I did martial arts for years, so I'll be doing Muay Thai. And then also I'm looking at climate change trends. I'm looking at polarization. So I'm trying to work with people on essentially developing pathways for queer people of color to go to Chicago, New York, Atlanta, safer places. Um, because of the polarization that we are seeing happening across the country. So for queer people who don't feel safe as a queer people of color, living in small towns, living in places where they're like, hey, I might need to go. I'm trying to figure out how that would work. But that's one thing I'm excited about doing because everyone deserves to be in a safe place where they feel connected to community and to other people like them.
Hmm.
So yeah.
And I feel like that's from the start of this, you being in New York, like that's one of the big reasons why you're there. It's just
Mm-hmm.
um, coming from a conservative place, realizing, yeah, I gotta get connected with the representation and people that look like you and make those connections. And I feel that 100%. What's something that you would tell your younger self, Jordan?
So I tell my younger self, hmm, and excuse the pause, I really have to think. I would probably tell myself, still living in like small town Missouri, that learn all the lessons you can so that you can heal later.
Mm,
Um, Knowing fully that, yeah, you're around people that don't see your full personality because you can't be your full personality yet. But with change is constant. People try to stop change, but change is like water. You can't really stop water. It just flows. It does whatever it needs to do. So I would tell my younger self to learn the lessons I need to learn so that I can heal later, and to know that there will be time for healing later because the world will change. And at one point, you're going to fit just fine. But for right now, learn the lessons you need to learn and know that you'll be okay.
yeah, learn the lessons to heal later. And I feel like that's what you've definitely done. I feel like, as I was saying earlier, if you're a person of color that grew up in a predominantly white space, you do learn a lot of different um, lessons. It's a different lifestyle. And you finding that healing of just like connecting with your parents and asking those questions and really having that therapeutic moment. I am going to actually do that for myself. Like, I am going to get those rooted questions because I was telling someone else, like, a lot of people, me included, like, I don't really know like my full history of just like what part of Africa like do we come up from, like our ancestors, like really that family tree of just like my great 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 grand parents, like what that looks like. So if anything, like you definitely encouraged me to just like find that rooted history within my families.
Absolutely. I think that every American should. So I actually talk on TikTok about this, but I think so. If you're American, you have three ways of essentially existing as an American. Either you are native, which means that you come from trauma of being subjugated to white supremacy, but also almost being exterminated. You're the descendant of enslaved people that were forced here, or you're an immigrant. And if you are an immigrant, you came here running from something. What was it? If you're an enslaved person, your ancestors were forced to these lands. What did they survive? Where did they survive it? How did that make you and your family the people that they are now? And if you're a Native American or Indigenous, what all did you go through or did your ancestors go through in order to survive? Because if you are Black, if you are Indigenous, and you're still here, your family line still exists, you're a miracle. So it's about figuring out how that all happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's yeah, that family tree, and not just like on the surface level, because like I said, I know like the surface level of it, they came from Arkansas and stuff like that, but really getting into like the grassroots of things. I appreciate you, Jordan, for coming on to Queen Talk today.
Likewise, I appreciate you for inviting.
Yes, the representation that you've shown is amazing, and your story is an interesting one. Growing up with a military family, your experiences, we have similarities, but again, just so much differences at the same time. Um, so just thank you again for being vulnerable and sharing your story on Queen Talk today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you want to let the people know how they can reach you, connect with you, please go ahead and do so.
Yes. So if you would like to reach out to me, you can actually find me on Instagram. My Instagram would be JA Global Nomad. So that's J as in Jack, A as in Apple, Global Nomad. And you'll see my name, Jordan Anderson Story. So feel free to add me there if you would like to. I'm also at TikTok at JA Global Nomad as well.
Yes, and that information will be in the description below if you guys want to get connected. Yeah, I would love to get connected with you in person for sure. You guys, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to let us know in the comments. Yeah, hit that like button, subscribe button, and let us know what you think of this episode. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. As always, family, friends, strangers, love and be nice.